The silence of your small apartment, a familiar shroud, presses in. Dust motes dance in the sliver of morning sun that dares to pierce the grimy window pane, illuminating the solitary existence you've carved out. Empty coffee mugs litter the scarred wooden table, monuments to countless sleepless nights spent staring at the ceiling, chasing ghosts that refuse to dissipate. Your reflection in the darkened glass shows a man etched with the lines of regret, a landscape of what was and what will likely never be again. Today, however, demands a semblance of normalcy, a charade you've perfected. You pull on a worn tweed jacket, the fabric stiff with disuse, and head out. The city hums its indifferent song around you, a symphony of sirens and distant traffic, none of it truly reaching the insulated core of your being. Your destination is an incongruous one for a man who once navigated the brutal geometry of crime scenes. The auction house backroom before a record sale. The air inside is thick with the scent of aged paper, polished wood, and the faint metallic tang of anticipation. You move through the labyrinthine corridors, a ghost among the living, past crates overflowing with forgotten treasures, canvases draped in protective sheeting, and the hushed, urgent murmurs of dealers and collectors. Your purpose here is simple: to appraise a collection of rare, vintage vinyl, a small, solitary pursuit that keeps the wolves of idleness and despair from your door. You reach the designated area, a cavernous space bathed in the stark glow of industrial lights. Rows of long tables stretch into the distance, laden with objects awaiting their moment on the block. A young man, barely out of university, gestures towards a stack of dusty record boxes. "Seth," he says, his voice a little too loud in the reverent quiet. "They're all yours. You don't need to look up to know who it is." The scent of stale tobacco and a particular brand of cheap aftershave precedes him. "Corbin," the voice rasps, a gravelly sound you haven't heard in years, yet instantly recognize. It belongs to a former colleague, a detective who once stood beside you, now a man whose gaze holds a mixture of pity and resentment. His eyes, usually sharp, are clouded with something you can't quite place. A grim urgency. "What do you want, Miller?" you ask, not bothering to turn. Your focus remains on the album, its worn cover a testament to a bygone era. "They found one," he says, the words clipped, devoid of preamble. "Last night. The docks, always the docks. You set the record down with deliberate slowness, turning to face him. Strangled, and it's the same signature, Seth, the exact same." The world narrows. Only Miller's words echo in the sudden, profound quiet of your mind. The same signature. You remember the call 6 years ago, the grim report from the old warehouse district. A victim, a petty thief, found in a similar state. No forced entry, no struggle. Just a silent, meticulous termination. The single, deliberate knot in the ligature. It was the case that consumed you, devoured your reputation, and ultimately spit you out. A husk of the detective you once were. The case they dubbed the Phantom. "Describe it," you demand, your voice rougher than you intended. A desperate clawing at the precipice of memory. "You're not involved." "Just tell me," you insist, a steel entering your tone that hasn't been there in years. The determination, long dormant, begins to stir. He sighs, running a hand over his thinning hair. No signs of a break-in. No struggle. The security footage, it's like he just walked in, did the job, and walked out without a ripple. The ligature, a single, precise knot. And he pauses, his eyes meeting yours, mirroring the horror you feel, a small silver coin left on the chest. An old sovereign, just like before. The silver coin. That was the detail that haunted your nightmares. The killer's macabre calling card, a taunt left for you. The detective who could never quite grasp the phantom. The exact same. The words reverberate, a hammer blow to the fragile piece you'd constructed. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. A meticulously planned series of murders, spanning 6 years. The killer you failed to catch had returned, or perhaps never truly left. A wave of nausea washes over you, but beneath it, a strange, terrible clarity begins to form. This was not just a new crime. It was a personal challenge, a direct message. The phantom had come back for you, Seth Corbin. It was the return of a specter, a breath from the grave of your former life. Around you, the air hung thick with the hushed reverence of objects poised on the precipice of new ownership. The faint, sweet perfume of antique furniture polish, the dry, papery scent of old documents, the metallic glint of silver pieces nestled in velvet-lined cases. Dust motes, like tiny dancing spirits, spun in the golden shafts of light that pierced the high, grimy windows, illuminating the quiet industry of handlers in white gloves, meticulously cataloging, arranging, preparing the silent treasures for their grand performance. But the world of gilt frames and porcelain figurines blurred. The words of the news broadcast, a cruel echo from a life you'd painstakingly dismantled, clawed at the fragile piece you'd built. The silver coin. Your breath caught, a jagged shard in your throat. You felt the familiar, unwelcome tightening in your chest, a phantom grip, as if the past had reached out and seized you by the lapels. You were examining a dull bronze sculpture, tracing the eroded lines of a forgotten face, when the presence made itself known. A shadow fell across the polished surface of a nearby mahogany display table, blotting out the intricate carving of a jade pendant. You didn't need to turn. The air shifted, heavy with an unspoken urgency, a scent of stale coffee and something else. Desperation, perhaps, or the lingering odor of 100 crime scenes. Seth. The voice was low, raspy, familiar, yet aged by an unseen burden. You slowly pivoted, your gaze lifting from the inert metal. His uniform was crisp, as always, but his face was a roadmap of sleepless nights and too many grim discoveries. Lines etched deeper around his eyes, and a weariness settled upon him like a shroud. He held a small, dark-colored folder clutched in one hand, his knuckles white. "The news," you stated, the words tasting like ash. It wasn't a question. He nodded, a jerky motion. "It's not just similar, Seth. He was found in his private gallery, nestled amongst his most prized acquisitions." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the opulent back room as if searching for an escape. And the signature. The coin. A pristine 1888 silver dollar, polished to a blinding sheen, placed in the same meticulous fashion. The detective's voice faltered on the last words, betraying a professional detachment stretched to its breaking point. "It's been years, Seth. We hoped it was over, that he was gone." You felt a tremor begin deep within you, a resonant frequency from a long-buried trauma. The phantom, the one who had dismantled your career piece by piece, leaving you with nothing but the ghost of an unsolved puzzle. "Why are you here?" you demanded, your voice hardening, the old defenses snapping back into place. "I'm not a detective anymore, you know that. I'm just the man who catalogs old stories, not solves new ones." You gestured vaguely at the stacks of antique journals and manuscripts piled on a nearby cart. "Because you were there, Seth," he insisted, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "You saw the original. You touched the evidence. You lived with it, breathed it until it choked you. No one else understands this. Artists like you do. The lead investigator, they're looking at a disgruntled business partner, a rival collector. All the usual suspects. But I know this isn't just a business dispute gone wrong." Your fingers brushed his, and you felt the faint tremor in his grip. The folder was cool, smooth, an innocuous skin over a terrible secret. You hesitated, your gaze fixed on the mundane object, a portal back to a nightmare you'd sworn to escape. The scent of dust and old paper from the back room suddenly seemed suffocating. "What do you need me for?" you asked, the question laced with a bitter resignation. You already knew the answer. The pull was undeniable, a magnetic force drawing iron filings to a powerful magnet. "Just look at it, please. Tell me if I'm insane," he pleaded, his voice cracking slightly. "Tell me if I'm seeing ghosts, or if the ghost has truly returned. We've got nothing. No forced entry, no witnesses, just the coin, and a dead man, posed with an unsettling elegance." You looked down at the folder in your hands. The weight of it was immense, far heavier than its actual mass, a concentrated burden of past failures and future horrors. You could walk away, you could refuse, you could tell him that your days of chasing phantoms were over, that the price you paid was too high. But the silver coin, that gleaming, taunting signature, was already echoing in the cavern of your mind. It wasn't just similar. It was a challenge, a direct message from the killer who had destroyed you, daring you to step back into the labyrinth. "Give me the highlights," you said, your voice barely audible over the distant, muted hum of the auction house preparing for its grand spectacle. The battle was already lost. You were already back in the game. The folder, a simple manila sheath, felt like a granite slab in your grip. You stood at the precipice of a choice. The past a hungry maw, the future an uncertain shadow. The memory of the price you paid, the whispers that followed you like a persistent chill, tried to drag you back from the edge. But then, a flicker. The image of a new victim, a fresh injustice mirroring an old, unpunished cruelty. No, you would not walk away. You would carry this weight, this burden of spectral vengeance into the fray once more. It was a space designed for anticipation, for the quiet appraisal of value before the clamor of bids. Here, amidst the hushed grandeur of a velvet-draped pedestal and the muted gleam of antique silver, you found a sturdy, unvarnished table. A faint hum of distant chatter, the occasional metallic clink of a moving display, provided a soft, rhythmic counterpoint to the quiet storm brewing within you. This was not a place for ghosts, yet they gathered here, unseen, breathing down your neck. You spread the contents of the folder across the scarred tabletop. The old case files first, the ones that had consumed you, then spat you out. Grainy photographs, each face a silent accusation, stared up from their glossed surfaces. The first victim, Eleanor Vance, a quiet librarian, found in a deserted park. The second, Thomas Thorne, a struggling artist, discovered in his cluttered studio. Then the third, a young musician, Lydia Bell, whose disappearance had been the final shattering blow to your career. 3 lives, seemingly disparate, yet linked by the invisible thread of a meticulous predator. Your fingers traced the faded ink of your own notes, the frantic scrawl of a man desperate for answers. Every detail had been scrutinized, every angle pursued, yet the killer had remained a phantom. What had you missed? You picked up a photograph of Eleanor Vance's crime scene. The usual chaos of an investigation had been meticulously captured. Evidence markers, forensic tools, the grim professionals at work. Your gaze drifted past the obvious, past the victim, past the bloodstains, to the periphery. There, half obscured by a fallen branch, a small, smooth object lay nestled in the damp earth. A river stone polished by eons of current, its gray surface almost glowing. You remembered it being logged as miscellaneous item, possible natural deposit. Dismissed. An insignificant detail in a sea of overwhelming horror. Then you turned to the new case files, the reason for your unwelcome return. The new victim, a history professor named Clara Davies, found in her study, a scene of artful disarray. The reports were crisp, the photographs stark in their digital clarity. And there it was. Not immediately obvious, not highlighted by any marker, but undeniable once you knew what to seek. Tucked beneath a fallen book, partially hidden by a scattered pile of papers, lay another riverstone. Identical in its smooth, gray perfection. This was no coincidence. The miscellaneous item was a signature, a silent declaration. You shuffled through the old files again, your eyes now sharpened by this grim revelation. Eleanor Vance, Thomas Thorne, Lydia Bell. Had the stone been present at all three scenes? You found it in the notes for Thorne's case, listed again as small, gray stone, unidentifiable origin. For Lydia Bell, whose body was never recovered, the details were sparser, focused on the search parameters, the missing person reports. But a witness, a street vendor near where Lydia was last seen, had reported seeing a glint of something pale in the hand of a figure walking away from the alley. At the time, it had been attributed to a reflection, a trick of light. Now you wondered. A polished river stone, catching the sun. This was not a frenzied act. It was a carefully constructed narrative, played out across decades. The quiet, almost poetic brutality of it all was a testament to a patience that bordered on the inhuman. You gathered the files, your hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the fierce surge of recognition. The phantom had a face, or at least a calling card. The path ahead was obscured, riddled with the ghosts of your past failures. But one thing was undeniably clear. You were no longer chasing smoke. The record sale would soon begin, the auctioneer's gavel poised to mark new ownership. But for you, the hammer had already fallen, sealing your fate to this grim pursuit. The bew of the previous moment stretched, a silent echo in the quiet confines of your study. The manila folder, heavy with ghosts, pressed against your palm. You wouldn't be dragged. You would dive. The whispers could follow, but they would no longer define. A flicker of resolve, cold and sharp, ignited in your gut. You opened the folder. The first photograph was a face, young and vibrant, now frozen in the stillness of memory. The date stamped beneath it was like a brand, searing the old wound anew. You traced the curve of the jawline, the hint of a smile that would never bloom. This was the face that started it all, the reason your name became a hushed stain on precinct walls. A fresh case file, tucked neatly beside the old, held an almost identical image. Another life extinguished, another future stolen decades apart. He was back. Or perhaps he had never truly left. A name from the old report, an antique dealer surfaced from the depths of your memory. His shop had been a dead end then, but the new file mentioned a recent acquisition, a specific antique locket scheduled for an upcoming auction. A sliver of hope, thin as spun glass, pierced the gloom. Not the anticipation of a gavel's fall, but the quiet anxiety of dormant value, waiting to be unleashed. Stacks of crated porcelain gleamed faintly under the bare bulbs, their surfaces mirroring your reflection. A gaunt stranger with eyes too old for his face. Velvet ropes cordoned off sections, protecting canvases shrouded in muslin. The security chief, a blocky man with eyes like polished stones, emerged from behind a towering cabinet of antique weaponry. He recognized you, of course. Everyone did. "Just looking," you replied, your voice a low rasp. "A specific lot, the L704. The security chief's lips thinned. "That's a restricted view. Curator only." "The curator," you pressed, "is expecting me. A private inquiry regarding provenance." A lie, spun with the ease of old habit. You watched his face, gauging the flicker of doubt, the grudging acceptance. Your reputation might be in tatters, but the sheer force of your presence still carried a faint, unsettling echo of authority. He grunted, then gestured vaguely towards a dimly lit alcove. "Fine. Each object held a story, a history, much like the one you were trying to unearth. And there it was, resting on a velvet cushion within a locked glass display case. The L704, a silver locket, intricately engraved with a swirling motif of ivy leaves. It was beautiful, deceptively innocent. You knelt, scrutinizing the locket. It was identical to the description in the new file, a piece allegedly belonging to the most recent victim. But something else caught your eye, not on the locket itself, but on the velvet cushion beneath it. A small folded slip of paper, tucked almost imperceptibly into the fabric. It hadn't been there in the photos. Your fingers, steady despite the tremor that ran through your nerves, fished it out. It was a fragment torn from a newspaper, no larger than your thumb. On it, a single word, cut from a headline, was pasted, Seth. And beneath it, a crudely drawn symbol, a stylized inverted triangle, its apex pointing down, with a single horizontal line bisecting its base. This wasn't a clue for the detective. This was a message for you. How had it been placed there in a supposedly secure area before a major sale? The audacity was breathtaking. The killer knew you were coming, knew you would look for this locket, knew your name. A wave of nausea washed over you, followed by a surge of pure, unadulterated fury. This wasn't just a case anymore. This was personal. Only a handful of people knew of its existence. And now, it was here, addressed to you. A direct taunt. A challenge. He was playing with you, Seth. He always had been. The price you paid for the first failure was only the beginning. Now he was coming for the rest. The air in the back room, once thick with the promise of forgotten treasures, now felt heavy with a different kind of weight, the looming shadow of a predator closing in. You clutched the crumpled paper, its edges digging into your palm, a visceral reminder of the invisible tether that now bound you to a killer. You had to catch him. A thin film of dust, disturbed in a way that defied the pristine order, shimmered in the weak emergency lights. How could it be here? A message, a warning, or a cruel taunt from the ghost you hunted? The first siren wail, distant and mournful, sliced through the quiet, growing louder, closer. You tucked the fragment deep into your jacket's inner pocket, its presence a small, defiant weight against your ribs. Footsteps pounded down the corridor, then the sharp, authoritative click of a heavy door being unlatched. Uniformed figures flooded the space, their movements precise, their faces grim. You melted into the periphery, a shadow among shadows, observing. Secure the perimeter. No one in, no one out, a voice boomed, cutting through the rising murmur. Disdain? Crossing his face before he turned his attention to the scene. Corbin. Still drawn to the stench, I see. You offered no reply, your eyes already dissecting the chaos, searching for the meticulous order that always underlay the Phantom's work. The official investigation began its methodical crawl. A forensics team, their gloved hands precise, moved like silent dancers across the polished floor. Their focus, however, seemed to settle quickly, almost too easily, on a figure being led away in cuffs. The security chief. Motives clear, the detective stated, his voice low but audible to a colleague. Been on the books for years, bad gambling debts. Just got a final notice on his mortgage. I swear, I saw something, a glint then. Nothing. His words were swallowed by the rising tide of official procedure, dismissed as the desperate pleas of a cornered man. He had been found near the scene, disoriented, a minor head wound suggesting a struggle. The narrative was constructing itself, neat and contained, around him. It was a plausible story, a convenient one. Too convenient. You watched the security chief being escorted out, his slumped shoulders carrying the weight of a crime he might not have committed. The official line of inquiry followed the path of least resistance. A disgruntled insider, a desperate act. But you knew the phantom. You knew the meticulous hand, the almost surgical precision. This wasn't desperation. This was artistry. You moved with a quiet purpose, your past authority giving you a ghost of privilege, allowing you to linger without being challenged too aggressively. You skirted the edges of the forensic sweep, your senses heightened, searching for the dissonance. The security chief was a burly man, known for his brute strength, his methods direct. The disturbance here, however, hinted at something more subtle. You noticed the lock on the vault door. It hadn't been forced. No pry marks, no telltale scratches. It had been opened. Perhaps with a key or a code. The security chief had access to both. But then your eyes drifted to a small, almost imperceptible smudge on the wall, just beside the vault's frame. It wasn't dust. It was a faint, iridescent powder, almost like crushed mother-of-pearl. It caught the ambient light, shimmering briefly. You knelt, pretending to tie a shoelace, and surreptitiously brushed a finger against it. The texture was fine, almost oily. This wasn't the kind of residue a man like the security chief would leave. He was a creature of steel and sweat, not delicate shimmering particles. Your mind flashed back to the previous crime, the one that had cost you everything. A similar, almost artistic flourish had been present then, a signature you had failed to decipher. A distinctive, almost decorative mark left behind, overlooked by the official channels, dismissed as an anomaly. Then, your eyes snagged on something else. A discarded security badge, not the security chief's, lay half-hidden beneath a display pedestal. It belonged to a junior guard, one who was supposed to be on duty at the main entrance, far from this back room. Why was his badge here? And why was it pristine, not scuffed or damaged as if torn off in a struggle? It felt like it had been placed, not dropped. A distraction. A diversion. The crumpled fragment in your pocket seemed to burn now, its silent message growing clearer. You remembered its strange symbol, a stylized bird, almost like a phoenix, but with sharp, almost predatory talons. It was the same symbol that had been found, barely visible at the periphery of the last cold case. A calling card, meant for you. The official investigation was a locomotive, gaining speed, hurtling towards the wrong station. They had their suspect, their narrative. The security chief, with his debts and his access, fit perfectly into their conventional understanding of crime. But you saw the subtle threads, the iridescent dust, the carefully placed badge, the unforced lock, all pointing away from the obvious. This wasn't a desperate act. This was a symphony, meticulously composed, each note placed with deliberate intent. The phantom killer hadn't just returned. They were playing a new movement, and the police were dancing to the wrong tune. The real hunt had just begun. Uniformed officers moved like shadows, their flashlights carving fleeting paths across draped canvases and crated antiquities. You stood amidst the quiet storm, the security chief's raw, desperate protests still a phantom echo in your mind, dismissed by the others as the flailing of a cornered animal. But you, Seth, you heard something else in his choked words, a fragile thread of truth woven into the fabric of his terror. A glint, then nothing. Your gaze swept the room, cataloging the chaos. This last piece, a hulking sentinel, stood near where the incident had unfolded, its surface reflecting the subdued light like a placid, ancient pool. You moved towards it, the floorboards groaning softly under your weight, a complaint from the old building. Just another dead end. The chief's story doesn't hold water. No forced entry, no trace. He gestured vaguely at the scene. Just a man cracking under pressure. You offered no reply, your attention already fixed on the cabinet. You felt for splinters, for anomalies, for anything that didn't belong. The wood was cool beneath your touch, smooth as riverstone, until your fingertips snagged on something. It was minuscule, barely a hairline fracture, yet too precise to be an accidental blemish. You leaned closer, your breath stirring the dust on its surface. It was a motif you had seen before, or rather felt the absence of, a ghost of a memory from a different time, a different place. The first victim, decades ago, found in their study, surrounded by rare books. The second, a collector of antique weaponry. The third, an art dealer. Each scene had been meticulously sanitized, yet in the periphery of your memory, a similar object had always been present, a silent sentinel to the crime. An antique writing desk, a display case for a ceremonial dagger, a gilded frame. The symbol on this cabinet, so small, so easily dismissed as a craftsman's flourish or an incidental scratch, was not random. It was a signature. You recalled the initial reports from the old cases, the endless photographs. You remembered a tiny detail dismissed as irrelevant, a unique knot in the wood, a specific pattern in the grain, a faint discoloration. Now you understood. The glint the security chief had seen? Perhaps it wasn't a weapon, but the flash of a tool as the killer meticulously etched their emblem, a final perverse act of ownership. The air in the back room seemed to thicken, pressing in on you. The symbol, you realized, wasn't just a mark. It was a declaration, a statement of connoisseurship, a twisted aesthetic woven into the fabric of the crimes. The killer was not just taking lives. They were claiming history, value, and the very essence of their victims' passions. The tension in the room, once external, now resided deep within you, a coiled spring of terrifying understanding. The game had just changed. You were no longer just chasing a killer. You were hunting a collector, one who carefully curated their grisly masterpieces. Your fingers, calloused from years of grappling with the unforgiving edges of crime scenes, and the smooth, cold steel of a service weapon traced the grain of the dark wood. It was rosewood, you realized, not just any rosewood. Crates, some splintered, others pristine, lined the walls, obscuring the precise dimensions of the space. Covered objects, their shapes hinting at forgotten grandeur, stood shrouded like silent sentinels awaiting their judgment. You were a trespasser, a ghost among the tangible. A soft cough shattered the hushed reverence, pulling your gaze from the intricate joinery. A figure emerged from behind a towering stack of canvases, a slender man in a charcoal suit, his spectacles perched low on his nose, giving him an air of perpetual scrutiny. The dealer's lips thinned, a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Indeed, a provenance shrouded in a delightful whisper of intrigue, as all the best pieces are. He gestured vaguely towards the cabinet, a proprietary sweep of his hand. From a private collection. The owner, well, they've moved on to other pursuits. Other pursuits, you echoed, the phrase hanging heavy in the air between you. A silent question mark. Or perhaps they were moved on. The dealer's smile faltered, a brittle edge replacing its earlier polish. His gaze sharpened, assessing, searching for the edge of your knowledge. You seem unusually informed given your presence here. He glanced around the back room, a subtle shift in his weight suggesting readiness to summon security, to enforce the sanctity of his domain. You ignored the veiled threat, your eyes scanning the cabinet again, your focus unwavering. Not a recent mar, but an old, almost polished groove. It was too regular to be accidental. A symbol? A letter? It looked like a stylized A or an inverted V, perhaps. But it wasn't just a scratch. It was carved, deliberate. This piece belonged to the collector, Arthur Finch, didn't it? You pressed, watching for his reaction. The name A Stone dropped into a still pond. Finch, a victim from an earlier unsolved case, whose collection had been dispersed. His death attributed to a tragic accident, an open file gathering dust. This is a private preview. "I have business with the truth," you countered, your voice dropping to an almost inaudible register, forcing him to lean closer, drawing him into your orbit, making him complicit in your hushed exchange. And the truth, in this place, often has a price tag. What's the story behind that mark? You pointed discreetly to the carved symbol, your finger hovering inches from the polished surface. A flaw, nothing more. Now I must insist you leave. He took a step forward, his hand subtly moving towards a hidden buzzer or a pocket, his intent clear. You held your ground. A flaw that looks remarkably like a signature. Or a brand. You remembered the old detective's notes, a fleeting mention of an unusual mark on a piece of furniture at Finch's scene, dismissed as a random scratch, an imperfection. But this was different. This was deliberate. A sudden, sharp movement. But years of instinct, honed in alleys and interrogation rooms, surged through you. You sidestepped, a blur of motion, letting his momentum carry him past. He stumbled, catching himself on a velvet-draped pedestal, sending a small porcelain figurine clattering to the floor, where it shattered with a delicate, violent chime. The sound echoed, too loud in the hushed space. Footsteps approached rapidly from the main hall. The auctioneer, perhaps, or a security guard, drawn by the sudden sharp noise. "You'll regret this," the dealer hissed, righting himself, his face a mask of furious calculation. He knew you weren't just a curious browser. You were a threat. Your gaze flickered to the cabinet one last time, cementing the image of that carved symbol in your mind, its intricate lines now screaming significance. The approaching footsteps grew louder, closer. You had seconds. You couldn't be seen in a scuffle here. Not now. Not when you were so close to something real, something tangible that tied the past to the present. Polished mahogany gleamed under stark utility lights, casting long, fractured shadows across stacks of crates and draped canvases. The hushed murmur of the main hall, where early bidders milled, was a distant tide against the immediate, vital silence you cultivated with the handler. The handler, a man whose eyes held the weary wisdom of countless backroom dealings, shifted his weight. Along a hidden seam, almost invisible. Always high value, always clean provenance on paper, but a certain energy about them. The serpent's kiss. The name resonated with a forgotten detail, a half-formed image from the periphery of your shattered career. You remembered a fragment of a report years ago, detailing an unusual tool mark found on a piece of jewelry recovered near one of the earliest victims. It had been dismissed as an anomaly, a coincidence. Now it screamed. Your mind, a relentless engine of recall, began to churn. You saw the crime scenes again, not as static photographs, but as living canvases. The small, exquisite silver locket clutched in the hand of the first victim, its clasp subtly altered. The ornate compass found in the pocket of the second, its brass casing bearing a faint, almost decorative scratch. You had dismissed them as incidental damage, wear and tear. But the handler's words painted them anew. This wasn't damage. It was a signature. "Who brings these pieces?" You pressed, your voice tight, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to lock into place with a terrifying click. The consignments are handled by the auctioneer directly. Always impeccable paperwork. Always a clean trail. But the feeling, the pieces are too perfect. Like they've been waiting for this moment. A sudden clang echoed from the far end of the back room as a security guard, a burly figure with a practiced impassivity, dropped a metal clamp. The sound, sharp and intrusive, severed the fragile intimacy of your exchange. The security guard met your eyes for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze, before turning back to his task. Not just by the security guard, but by something larger, more insidious. You turned your attention to the items awaiting their moment on the block. Your eyes, now honed by a singular focus, scanned the array of antiques. And then, nestled among a display of antique timepieces, you saw it. A pocket watch, silver-cased, its face adorned with Roman numerals. It was a common enough design, yet something about it snagged your attention. You reached for it, your fingers brushing against the cool metal. As you turned it over, your thumb found the hidden catch. With a soft click, the backplate sprang open, revealing not the intricate gears within, but a miniature, faded photograph. And there, etched with an almost invisible delicacy along the inner rim of the casing, was the filigree. But it was the photograph that truly stole your breath. A young woman, her smile bright, her eyes full of life. The first victim. This watch, this very watch, had been reported missing from her personal effects, never recovered. It was a ghost, brought back to life, paraded for sale. Your gaze snapped to the consignment tag attached to the watch. It listed the provenance as Estate of Eleanor Vance. Eleanor Vance. The name hit you like a physical blow. The auctioneer, the very person responsible for the meticulous paperwork, the clean trails, the person who had handled the consignments directly. The pieces didn't just fit, they slammed together. It wasn't just about murder. It was about a twisted ritual, a public desecration of memory, a morbid display of power. And the auctioneer, Eleanor Vance, was at the heart of it all. The motive, suddenly stark and undeniable, bloomed in your mind. Eleanor Vance's family had been ruined years ago, implicated in a fraudulent art scheme that had been exposed by the very people who became the killer's first victims. This wasn't just revenge. It was an elaborate, decades-long performance, an auction of retribution, selling off the remnants of those who had wronged her, one piece, one life, at a time. The serpent's kiss wasn't just a mark. It was a brand, a claim of ownership over the lives he had meticulously unmade. The truth, in this place, had indeed had a price tag, and you had just paid it in full. The security guard, a burly silhouette against the distant glow of an emergency exit sign, stooped to retrieve the dropped clamp, his movements heavy and indifferent. The slight tremor that ran through his frame was a discordant note, a ripple across the surface of his carefully constructed composure. His face, until then a study in practiced neutrality, tightened further, pulling the skin taut across sharp cheekbones. A chill, sudden and sharp, traced a path down your spine, a premonition colder than the dusty air. It was the same glint you had seen in the eyes of the phantom, the elusive architect of the past, the one who had slipped through your fingers like smoke. Perhaps, you replied, your voice steady despite the sudden prickle of unease. You pushed off the crate you were leaning against, the movement slow, deliberate. Or perhaps a break in concentration. You let your gaze sweep over the crates, the shrouded furniture, the stacks of rare vinyl records nestled in archival boxes. One particular box, a bespoke wooden case with intricate brass fittings, sat prominently on a cleared table, awaiting its moment in the spotlight of the record sale. It was the centerpiece, the item expected to fetch an unprecedented sum. The handler's lips curved, a sliver of a smile that never quite reached his eyes. We all have our moments, Seth. His gaze finally met yours, and in their depths, you saw it. Not the reflection of a colleague or a handler, but the cold, calculating intelligence that had eluded you for years. The pieces, scattered and disparate, suddenly clicked into place with a sickening thud. The meticulous planning, the artistic flourishes of each crime, the almost poetic cruelty. It all coalesced into the face before you. You. You breathed, the single word hanging in the stale air, heavy with the weight of decades. The realization was a punch to the gut, a bitter truth that tasted like ash. The handler's smile widened, a true, unvarnished expression of malicious triumph. Took you long enough, Seth Corbin. I wondered if the great detective had truly lost his touch, or if the ghost of his past had finally blinded him completely. He pushed off the crate with a fluid motion, landing silently on the concrete floor. His hand, no longer merely adjusting his lapel, dipped inside his jacket. When it re-emerged, it cradled a small, silver-plated derringer, its barrel glinting malevolently in the dim light. "The record," you stated, your eyes fixed on the antique firearm, yet your mind racing, connecting the dots. This sale, it's connected, isn't it? This particular pressing, he gestured with the gun towards the ornate wooden box, contains a fragment of a memory, a sound that should have been erased. And tonight, it will be, along with the rest of this monument to forgotten lives. A flick of his wrist, and a small, clear vial appeared in his other hand, filled with a viscous amber liquid. The scent of solvent, acrid and sharp, began to permeate the air. The security guard, still fumbling with his clamp at the far end, was oblivious, a lamb to the slaughter. "You won't get away with it," you declared, your voice firm, resolute. The determination that had flickered in your heart now blazed into a roaring inferno. This was it, the culmination of everything. "Oh, but I will, Seth," he countered, his eyes alight with a dangerous glee. "Just as I always have. And you, my dear detective, will be the final witness to my masterpiece, consumed by the very flames you failed to prevent." He took a step towards the wooden record box, the derringer held steady, aimed squarely at your chest. Your gaze darted around the cluttered back room, assessing angles, distances, potential weapons. Crates, dust sheets, a forgotten trolley, a heavy brass stand. The air grew thick with the scent of the accelerant as he uncorked the vial, a thin stream of the liquid already beginning to trickle onto the valuable, irreplaceable record box. The metallic click of the derringer's hammer being pulled back echoed like a death knell in the cavernous space. The air grew thick with the scent of aged paper and forgotten lives, a dusty cloak settling around you. You could feel the rigid tension in your own shoulders, the quiet hum of adrenaline preparing your muscles for a sudden, violent release. He took another deliberate step, the small pistol steady, its dark maw fixed on your sternum. It always comes back to this, doesn't it, Seth? His voice, low and raspy, was that of the auction house proprietor, a man you'd known for years. A fixture in the quiet corners of your past, always a polite nod, a shared lament about the fading art of vinyl. Your gaze flickered to the heavy brass stand, a display easel for some forgotten painting, standing precariously close to your left. The distance was a gamble. One quick lunge, a swift swing, and perhaps his finger tightened imperceptibly on the trigger. There was no time for deliberation. With a primal surge, you lunged, not directly at him, but at the brass stand, sweeping it up in a desperate arc. The proprietor, startled by your sudden, uncharacteristic burst of speed, flinched, his aim momentarily disrupted. The heavy brass connected with his arm, not cleanly, but enough to send a searing pain through his elbow. Before he could recover, you were on him. A lifetime of suppressed rage and professional disappointment fueling your movements. You tackled him against a wall of stacked framed prints, the brittle glass groaning under the impact. He clawed at your face, his nails sharp, but your grip was unyielding. You pinned him, one hand pressing against his throat, not to choke, but to hold him fast, to force him to meet your eyes. His face, once so blandly agreeable, was now contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. Why? The word tore from your throat, raw and ragged. You always saw too much. The lead detective, his expression grim and alert, stood framed in the doorway, a service weapon held steady. Behind him, other officers flooded in, their flashlights cutting through the dust motes dancing in the dim light. "Step away," the lead detective commanded, his voice sharp with authority. You released your hold, stepping back slowly, your chest heaving, the scent of gunpowder and old paper still clinging to the air. The proprietor slumped against the wall, eyes still fixed on you, a defeated sneer twisting his lips. He offered no resistance as two officers moved in, securing his wrists with practiced efficiency. They found the derringer, its small, deadly form retrieved from beneath the hat boxes. The lead detective approached you, his gaze sweeping over your disheveled form, the faint scratch marks on your cheek. "You all right, Seth?" You nodded, a slow, weary gesture. He's the one, the auction house proprietor. The officers exchanged glances, the pieces of a decades-old puzzle clicking into place for them too. The phantom killer, the elusive orchestrator, was finally unmasked, a mundane figure cloaked in the ordinary. Justice, in its slow, grinding way, had finally arrived. A profound exhaustion settled over you, a weight that had been held at bay for years by the relentless pursuit. Your body ached, a symphony of minor bruises and muscle strain, but it was the quiet ache behind your eyes that spoke of the deeper toll. The ghost of your career, the specter of the victims, the years of doubt and self-recrimination. They all seemed to recede, leaving behind a stark, quiet clarity. You leaned against a stack of antique furniture, the rough wood pressing against your back, and allowed yourself a deep, shuddering breath. The case was closed. The killer was caught. The path ahead was unclear, but for the first time in a very long time, it felt like a path you could choose, rather than one you were condemned to walk. They had led him away, the orchestrator, his gaze as unyielding as the granite slabs of a forgotten monument, a silent testament to the insidious nature of his craft. Your breath, a shallow thing, hitched in your chest. The chase was over. The phantom, finally corporeal. Yet the victory tasted less like triumph and more like the bitter dregs of a long-forgotten grief. Years of shadows, years of whispers, years of your name dragged through the mud, all culminating in this desolate room, among crates stacked high with forgotten heirlooms and canvases shrouded in canvas. A hand settled on your shoulder, firm and unexpected. You turned to face the detective. His eyes, usually sharp and scrutinizing, now held a glint of something akin to respect, perhaps even weariness that mirrored your own. He didn't speak immediately, simply met your gaze, a silent acknowledgement passing between you. The commander, a formidable presence even now, approached, his posture less rigid than you remembered. "Seth?" The commander's voice was low, devoid of its usual clipped authority. "They've taken him to processing. The full confession will come. It always does in the end." He paused, studying the lines etched around your eyes, the permanent set of your jaw. "You were right. All along." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken apologies, with the weight of years. You were right. It didn't erase the past, couldn't mend the broken pieces of what you once were. But it was a balm, a fragile offering. Your gaze drifted across the room. A mahogany desk, scarred with generations of use, held a ledger open to a blank page. A collection of antique timepieces, their hands frozen at various hours, lay nestled in velvet-lined trays. Each object, silent and still, seemed to absorb the lingering tension, holding it captive within its form. A future unobserved, perhaps. The detective cleared his throat. "There's talk, Seth, about your reinstatement. The department needs minds like yours. Always has." You considered his words, the faint scent of possibility mingling with the dust and the lingering metallic tang. To return. To step back into the rigid structure, the familiar cadence of police work. The thought was a complicated tapestry, woven with threads of longing and threads of profound exhaustion. The commander gave a sigh. "Think about it. You've earned the right to choose." He turned to leave, but paused at the threshold, looking back at you, a figure framed by the dim light of the back room. The records will be amended. Your name, cleared. The promise of vindication, a fragile shield against the world's judgment. But the internal landscape, your own personal cartography, had been irrevocably altered. The ordeal had forged something new, something sharper, more attuned to the nuances of deceit, more wary of the masks people wore. You picked up a small, intricately carved wooden bird from a nearby display table. Its wings were spread, caught mid-flight, a silent testament to freedom, to movement. Your fingers traced the smooth grain, the delicate lines of its form. The world outside, beyond these walls, was a canvas waiting for new strokes. Perhaps your purpose wasn't to return to the precise measured beats of your former life, but to chart a different course, guided by the indelible mark this hunt had left upon your soul. The tension, though diminished, had not entirely departed. It had simply shifted, transformed into a quiet hum of awareness, a heightened sensitivity to the world's hidden currents. You felt a profound sense of peace, yes, but it was a peace born from resolution, not from forgetting. You placed the wooden bird back down, its silent flight now a symbol of your own unfolding journey. The ordinary world was asserting itself, reclaiming the space from the extraordinary violence that had briefly stained it. You took one last lingering look at the empty space where the killer had stood, then turned towards the door, towards the blinding promise of a new morning and a future you would have to build, piece by careful piece. Your steps were deliberate, measured, the quiet resolve of a man who had walked through fire and emerged, not unscathed, but undeniably changed.